The World Meteorological Organization recently reported that the month of June 2023 is the hottest on record. And indeed, we have seen that countries in the southern hemisphere are experiencing a milder winter, while those up north, especially in countries in southern Europe, are experiencing extreme hot weather patterns. So how are these climatic conditions likely to affect food security in Africa? I spoke to Bibi Giyose, who is the Senior Advisor for Nutrition and Food Security at the African Union Development Agency NEPAD in Johannesburg, South Africa.
With climate change, farmers are not able to know when and how to plant. For instance, in terms of the soil depletion, we are seeing that many of the regions are actually experiencing, soil nutrient losses. What this means is that if you were able to plant your maize, your sorghum, your millet, your vegetables, you are no longer able to do that without implementing or applying fertilizers. And we know that fertilizers have become more expensive. So we should be going back to the basics to say, how can we have natural, compost, organic fertilizers instead of relying on chemical fertilizers, because they are also a cause of soil depletion, by the way. So what we would like to see as a continent is a case whereby, one, our policies are directing us to say we should be educating our farmers, informing our consumers of the effects of these chemical fertilizers so that we can combat the effects of climate change, environmental depletion, in a very natural and organic way.
From an African Union perspective then, how would some of these policy shifts or practices around using more compost and natural agricultural methods, how would these then be effected?
My thinking and my advice would be, let's look at the smallholder farmers, because they are the ones who actually feed the nations, right? Commercial farming, I'm not by any means diminishing commercial farming. It is important because it is business. But nevertheless, we should be saying, how do we support the smallholder farmers from a policy point of view? Let's provide them with the necessary inputs, okay? The, quality seed, the methods and ways to make their own compost. I mean, I've been to Latin America many times, and I've seen that actually they have almost kicked out chemical fertilizers. They're using biological fertilizers. So my policy point of view would be, let's move away from chemical fertilizers. Let's make methods and make them available. I worry about the fact that we've shifted to 4, international staples, which is rice, maize, wheat, and potatoes, some of which they are not even indigenous to Africa. Why can't we go back to growing our millets, our sweet potatoes, our cassava, etc., etc.?
Yeah.
So that would be my thinking.
You're touching on aspects that are quite controversial, especially in Southern Africa. We've seen debates in countries such as Malawi, Zambia, with the issue of maize, which is a staple food there, and the diversification, where sometimes government has advised the population to go to food products such as sweet potatoes and millet. And this is a society, or these are societies that are heavily entrenched and as far as their nutrition is concerned, on consumption of maize meal. So how then do you convince them?
We have already a program from the perspective of the AUDA, NEPAD, and FAO combined, where we are wanting to promote traditional and indigenous foods. By the way, maize is not an indigenous crop to Africa. Maize is very much from Latin America, it's from South America. And unfortunately, when maize was imported to Africa, we heavily depended on white maize. We discarded the yellow maize. If you remember, we used to grow yellow maize, and it is much higher in vitamins and minerals. White maize is exactly just that, starch.
People in Zambia won't eat yellow maize anymore. we frown upon
it. No, exactly. And it's very unfortunate, because if you look at the nutrient content of white maize, there's really nothing in there. It is just starch to fill the belly. And I worry about the lack of diversity, because if we were to look at our millets, our sorghums, which are much higher in nutrient content, we would not be seeing the levels of malnutrition that we're seeing today. And it should be a policy for government. I can give an example of my own country, Botswana. We don't grow much maize. We grow sorghum. We've gone back to sorghum and millet. And we made it a policy that we support smallholder farmers to do that. And now today, we have sorghum flour and millet flour on the supermarket shelves because of that policy change. The transformation is very important.
It's very interesting there, Bibi, that you talk about maize not having originated from the continent, from Africa.
It is the other way around. I mean, maize in its different colors. And it's interesting because if you go to Latin America, they have maize ranging in color from deep purple to white. And in between, we get these very interesting varieties. Same as potatoes. If you go to Latin America, I've never eaten so much different varieties of potatoes, again, ranging from deep purple to white potatoes. And it's very interesting because when we think about maize, like you say, people think maize is indigenous to Africa, which is not the case. So we have to start educating people about this fact so that they know and they can appreciate and revere their traditional and indigenous crops and commodities, because we are losing our cultures very, very fast.
So in other words, you're saying that if we want to farm maize, in the manner that which we've been farming it, with all these changing climatic conditions, then we need to totally digress from using chemical fertilizers to organic methods. Because it's not indigenous to the continent.
Yeah, okay. Let me give you an example of quinoa, which has become very much, sought after. Quinoa is indigenous to Latin America and is a traditional crop. Before, nobody knew about quinoa, but now it is an exotic, food that is very expensive on the supermarket shelves in Europe, in America.
So quinoa is a root starch, is it?
No, it's like sorghum. It's like millet.
Okay.
It's a grain. It's a
grain, yes.
It's a grain that is very high in protein, so it is very nutritious. And now, Latin America is really reaping the benefits of having made quinoa into an internationally approved and appreciated crop. So I think we should really go back to educating the people that dietary diversity is critical. Let's combine, let's get our millets and sorghums and cassavas and sweet potatoes and matokes on the tables, together with vegetables and more and more and more vegetables. People. Africa needs to eat better. We need to have a colorful plate.
So these diverse crops, other than maize meal, which is a staple in most parts of the continent, are not likely to be affected adversely by changing weather patterns?
Not at all, because think about it. If you are in the Kalahari, if you are in the Sahel, it is desert, right? So maize is not going to grow very well. So that is why we say people should be growing hardier crops, the sorghums and the millets, because they can tolerate the dry weather. They can tolerate less rain and still grow well, and the farmer would be better with it, for economic purposes, for nutritional purposes, for food security, and literally everything around what the household and the farm household needs.
You're a nutritionist yourself. How do you convince people to change their eating patterns?
I think this is where now working with the media from a communications point of view, from a messaging point of view, is going to be critical. And we as nutritionists and dietitians, we should put ourselves in a position where we make these foods, if I can call it sexier, palatable. We create recipes that are interesting. We don't serve them the same old way. So engaging with the educators, engaging with the communications, engaging with consumer behavior change is going to be the point that will really, get the nail on the head. Because otherwise, if people are not convinced, if they don't know that they can play around with these foods, then they're not going to get interested. And we should start actually with the children, because if you educate a child, they're going to be educating the parents. So in terms of school feeding programs, we are wanting to educate kids from school and put these commodities into their daily school menus.
We want to thank you very much for your time, Bibi. These are very interesting insights that you've shared, and we will continue with this discussion, as time goes by, to just find out how well, for instance, from your perspective, the African Union Development Agency, some of these policies are being implemented. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you.